As we finish filming this episode, the country is awaiting the outcome of the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse, a fascist thug who at age 17 shot 3 protesters for Black Lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin last August. The 2 men he killed, Joseph Jojo Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber, and the third he seriously injured, Gage Grosskreutz, are heroes whose stand and sacrifice should never be forgotten. They were protesting the police shooting of a black man named Jacob Blake. Kyle Rittenhouse faces multiple charges, from first-degree intentional homicide and use of a dangerous weapon, which carries mandatory life sentence, to several lesser charges. Now, in this trial, his lawyers have tried to paint him as a young man who came out to defend small businesses from rioters and arsonists and was attacked and had to defend himself from violent protesters. None of this is true. Justice demands that Rittenhouse be convicted, not exonerated. And it is important that the Revcoms, members of Refuse Fascism, Jacob Blake's uncle, and a handful of others have been outside the courthouse demanding conviction. The right and the responsibility of the people to stand up against police terror and white supremacy must be defended. And it is shameful that there are not thousands and many more people out demanding justice. The stakes of this trial are much greater than what will happen to Kyle Rittenhouse as an individual. This trial is taking place at a time when fanatical fascists are invading every sphere of public life, attempting to terrorize people who don't go along with them. Public health officials are being bullied by mobs, told, "We know where you live." Election officials are threatened for not going along with Trump's big lie of a stolen election. Some of them have armed protesters outside their homes. Fascist lawmakers are demanding book burnings. Increasingly, it takes real courage to stand up for what is right, and this is getting worse by the day. And through this trial, fascists are fighting to put a judicial stamp of approval on their so-called right to bring high-powered weapons to protests, their right to kill people who they claim are violent rioters or anyone who dares to try to disarm them, their right to totally dominate the public square. To understand how this is so, we need to look at more than what's gone on in the trial day by day. We need to pull back the lens and look at what was going on in society when Kyle Rittenhouse took his AR-15 rifle to Kenosha and opened fire. Last August 23rd, 3 months into the beautiful rising that was sparked by the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, the police shot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back in Kenosha, Wisconsin, partially paralyzing him for life. For good reason, protests broke out. Now, for months, people had been filling the streets with their outrage against police brutality and institutionalized white supremacy. People were asking big questions about this country and its history. Confederate statues started coming down. These outpourings were so beautiful, so powerful, and so righteous that they inspired people all over the world. And for a while, the fascists and white supremacists from Trump on down were put on the defensive. The deranged Trump supporters who had been out storming state capitals over COVID restrictions were suddenly almost nowhere to be seen. And Trump himself, that bloated bag of fascist feces, was driven into hiding in a bunker. All of this gives a sense of the strength of the people. It's an important glimpse of the potential for revolution. But through all this as well, the fascists were fighting to re-seize the initiative politically in society and to take back the public square. And Donald Trump chose Juneteenth weekend, the time when Black people have long celebrated the end of slavery, to go down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, the site of the white supremacist massacre and destruction of Black Wall Street, very close to the 100th year anniversary of that crime. Trump chose this time and this place to rant against the protests, against Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and to whip up his supporters to revenge. And then Trump took all this further on July 4th at Mount Rushmore. In Portland, unidentified federal agents began kidnapping protesters off the streets. Around the country, fascist good old boys started showing up to protests armed. Some plowed into protesters with their cars. And Trump caravans shot paintballs and sprayed protesters in the streets. Down in Texas, a Trump caravan nearly drove a Biden-Harris campaign bus off the road. Listen to what Kenosha Sheriff David Beth said.
There's some people that aren't worth saving. We need to build warehouses to put these people into it and lock them away for the rest of their lives. Let's stop them from truly, at least some of these males going out and getting 10 other women pregnant and having small children. We put them away. We put them away for the rest of their lives so that the rest of us can be better.
And note well, not long after this video, Trump publicly met with this sheriff. So it was in this atmosphere that the Trump-loving 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse took an AR-15 and answered the call of other fascists to go to Kenosha. It was in this atmosphere that police in Kenosha thanked Kyle and the other fascists and handed them water.
Water? You need water? We'll give you a couple. We appreciate you guys, we really do.
It was in this context that Rittenhouse opened fire and killed unarmed protesters. And it was in this context that Kyle Rittenhouse immediately became a hero to fascists everywhere. Donald Trump defended him.
Then the actions of vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse.
We're looking at all of it. That was an interesting situation. You saw the same tape as I saw. And he was trying to get away from them, I guess, it looks like. And he fell. And then they very violently attacked him. He was in very big trouble. He probably would have been killed. But
Fascists put his face on T-shirts. Kyle Rittenhouse, along with the white couple in St. Louis who brandished weapons against Black Lives Matter protesters, became pivotal symbols of the GOP fascists' more and more open embrace of violence and terror. As the Proud Boys mobilized increasingly violent protests in D.C., which contributed and led up to the January 6th insurrection attempt at the U.S. Capitol, they chanted Kyle Rittenhouse's name.
Break out Kyle! Break out Kyle! Break out Kyle! Break out Kyle!
At revcom.us, we get into the details and thoroughly expose the lie that Rittenhouse acted in self-defense. And we urge you to read this and to follow revcom.us and the revcoms on social media for further analysis as the verdict comes down. But again, what is most important to understand is how this trial fits into the larger fight for the future. And the same is true of the trial down in Georgia of the 3 white men who killed Ahmaud Arbery, an unarmed 25-year-old black man, which we got into more deeply in last week's episode. And this is true as well of the trial of the white supremacists and the fascists who carried out violence and murder in Charlottesville back in 2017. All of this makes it even more important that Justin Blake, Jacob Blake's uncle, along with the Revcoms and a few others, are standing up in Kenosha, upholding the memories and the examples of Jojo Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber, and demanding justice. But as we emphasize at revcom.us, the passivity and fear from way too many other people is a huge problem. Doing nothing when unarmed protesters are killed, doing nothing when a fascist movement lionizes their killer, doing nothing when a high-stakes trial over whether more of this will be green-lighted, all of this paves the road for something even more monstrous. Yes, courage is needed right now, but for this struggle to go where it needs to go, something more than that is needed as well. We need the orientation, analysis, and leadership, and a growing revolutionary force fighting to organize people to politically take on these fascists and to defend the people under attack. And we need to do this as part of getting rid of the whole system that thrives on white supremacy and has now unleashed these fascists. The analysis, the orientation, the leadership that we need exists in Bob Avakian, the revolutionary leader and the author of the New Communism. And the core of the revolutionary force we need exists in the Revcoms. But this must grow, and it must grow rapidly. The situation demands that decent people everywhere reflect on and act on these words from a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution issued by the RevComs. Quote, "These days, there is a lot of talk about another civil war, especially from fascists in government and in the broader society, who think they could just carry out a one-sided slaughter of those they hate, including Black people and other people of color, illegal immigrants, uppity women, and those who don't conform to traditional sexual and gender relations and norms. This situation needs to be radically changed to where there are masses of people prepared to defeat these fascists, and to do so as part of getting rid of this whole system, which has bred these fascists, along with all the other horrors it constantly perpetuates. What we need is repolarization for revolution, making real revolution an active and increasingly powerful force of first thousands and then millions of people organized to work for and win more and more people to this revolution, radically changing the terrain on which the revolution will be fought.